Hello, hello. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're going to get started here. If you could take a seat. Okay, so today we're going to go over our updates and upcoming events. And then we have the CEO of AMA. We're going to be doing a fireside chat and then going over just some more upcoming events and ways to get involved.
So next week, if you are going to be on the board for AMA next semester, whether it's being on the AMA executive board, sales board, D board, social impact board, CMU board, digital board, we're gonna be doing an all board meeting at 8 p.m. in this room, or at 7 p.m. in this room next Monday. So if you are going to be on the board, it is a requirement that you're there. If you can't, reach out to me separately. And then the day after that, so Tuesday, we're going to do an AMA kickball event. Everybody loves kickball. And we're going to be having a little cookout there as well. So free dinner. And that'll be at Sarin Park from 5 to 6:30. I know Sarin Park is a big place, but just look for a group of big AMA people and you'll find us. I'm probably going to be the only ones there. So, and then next week, Wednesday, we're going to be doing a CPR training session at our AMA meeting. So if you want to get your CPR certification, anybody can do it, even if you're not a paid AMA member. Please show up. We'd love to have you there, and then you can get your certification out of it.
All right, so now we are going to introduce Bennie F. Johnson. Bennie F. Johnson is the Chief Executive Officer of the American Marketing Association, and as the leading global professional marketing association, the AMA is the essential community for marketers. From students and practitioners to executives and academics, AMA aims to elevate the profession, deepen knowledge, and make a lasting impact. AMA's vibrant community of marketers spans more than 70 chapters and has a presence on 350 continents.
Probably me. Oh my goodness.
Blame it on the bald guy. Sorry, Charles. And has a presence on 350 college campuses across North America. AMA is home to award-winning content, PCM professional certifications, 5 premier academic journals, and industry-leading live and virtual training events. Bennie is the host of AMA's podcast, Marketing And. He has most recently served as the executive director of the AIGA and which is the largest professional association for design. It aims to grow the power of design as a professional craft, strategic advantage, business driver, and catalyst for positive impact. He recently hosted the acclaimed Design Adjacent podcast and the Design Leadership Fireside Chat series from 2020 to 2022. He currently serves on the board of overseers for Columbia University's School of Professional Studies and is a former board chair of the Smithsonian Anacostia Community Museum. Bennie is also a special advisor to the People's Graphic Design Archive, and he has recently been named to the board of the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. Bennie thrives on the connections between marketing, technology, education, and innovation, with the experience in strategic and consumer marketing, brand management, and innovation management. He is drawn to opportunities that allow him to lead and create new modes for business engagement. He has broad experience growing brands, businesses, and organizations with a special focus on venture launch and brand relaunch business environments. Bennie graduated from Yale University with a Bachelor of Arts and from Columbia University's School of Professional Studies with a Master of Science in Strategic Communications. And with that, we would like to kickstart the fireside chat. Thank you, Bennie, for coming out today. And we mentioned that podcast that he is the host of. So if anyone, I encourage all of you guys to listen, especially if you enjoy the conversation today. So you can access that through that QR code.
Yeah. So again, thank you, Bennie, so much for being here today. It's absolutely an honor to have you. Thank you for having me. First, I have to apologize to my friend for having you have to read that bio. I'm so sorry you had to read all of that. It's always surreal to hear. We're getting a little feedback there. It's always surreal to hear someone read the bio of like your experience and the things that you've done. Because when you're living life in that, it doesn't lay out nice and neat in paragraphs like that. And then I did this, and then we did this. It makes it seem like I knew exactly what I was going to do next. If you leave with anything from this conversation, know that you can have no idea what you're doing next, and that's okay. And that's part of the strategic fun of being in marketing and growing and thriving, that your next can be anything and it can be everything.
Yeah. So, Benny, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how you got started, in marketing. I know Alana read through a lot of
Oh,
your bio, but you've been at the AMA for 3 years now. Can you kind of talk a little bit about your journey prior to becoming CEO at AMA?
so I will tell you that it was kind of this has been a really surreal kind of meta moment of, I was the kid who loved marketing, who got a chance to become a marketing CMO, who now gets the chance to run the marketing association. But kind of thinking about those three levels of all of this coming together. So my first experience in marketing, I had no idea what marketing was. I didn't understand brand. I didn't understand strategy. I was a kid who wanted to start a business and figured there was an opportunity to sell candy on a school bus. That was my first way in starting in marketing. I was in the fourth grade and I figured out that we were having a school trip to an amusement park. And I asked the teacher if I could sell candy on the bus. And I knew enough then to know I didn't know pricing strategy or promotion or placement or all the awesome things you're learning. I just had this sense that if I sold candy on the bus and people couldn't buy it from any place else and I charged them a good price, they would buy it. And so that's what we did. But the fun part of this story is I found out soon that we weren't just having one bus, that there were two buses. Creates a problem. I'm only in one space. So I reached out to a couple of other kids that I thought were trustworthy and I created a franchise. Now, that's all of my adult marketing logic going into it. At the time, it was, I could sell this candy. I've got these people on this bus. If you can sell them for me, I'll give you a cut. And those are the kind of experiences that I had. I started later on. I started my first business was doing bus trips to amusement parks. So much so I wrote about that in my college essay. And what blew me away when I did this is I competed in a business competition for high school kids. And I submitted this business plan. And I remember I didn't win, and I had the judges tell me that it would never work. Real takeaway from that, complete butterfly moment. Well, bumblebee to be exact. Bumblebees are not supposed to be able to fly, but they do. They're not supposed to be. All the science tells you that they won't. There were MBAs in the room who were probably my age and our age now, who were telling me as this kid that this business plan that I had wouldn't work. I was running a business for 2 years already. So sometimes you got to believe in yourself and believe what's happening in there, because there was real money being made, real business. They didn't understand that when you're 17 and you need to go to an amusement park, having a trip with your peers is actually advantageous. If you're 45, you have a car, you have a family, you don't care. So my business really focused on that. Skip ahead through college and everything else. I got great opportunities. I was in the brand management program at Procter and Gamble, so learned a ton about brands. I did some work at PwC on marketing and strategy, and then my first jobs ended up being in small and mid-sized businesses, rebuilding marketing programs. Um, Doing that, I moved into some technology companies. I did early online education, so building products that were new that didn't exist in the market, and pulling all those things together. So lots of different jobs in there, but always learning from the spaces. Eventually, I got the opportunity to apply to run marketing for a professional association. And it was just a job interview, just a regular job interview. It wasn't even high on the list. But I will tell you, I took the interview and it changed my life. It gave me an opportunity to work in an industry that I hadn't been familiar with, but had all the things I wanted. They wanted innovation, they wanted global engagement, they wanted strategy, they wanted somebody to build growth. And I was hired as the head of marketing. And we launched the global credential across 75 countries. And I got a chance to build from that. And it put me in the space with professional associations, where I got a chance to work with HR, privacy, design, as we mentioned before. And while I was doing that, I loved the job completely. Sometimes you can have something you love. And I went home one day and looked at my spam filter. So pro tip, always check your spam filter. It wasn't that I didn't think I should be fancy and get a lot of emails or whatever. I just noticed I hadn't gotten any emails. That seemed strange. I went in the spam filter and there was a note from a recruiter that said, AMA CEO, call now. And having that first conversation, it was all those things that I loved about marketing as a little kid who was selling candy. It was all the things I loved about doing business strategy and innovation. and it was the opportunity to have an impact on the profession. So they told me to call, and I said yes. So that's kind of how that went in. We told it in a couple of minutes. All those decisions in there were just happening in the moment and just trying to grow and do the best right things.
Yeah, obviously you've had a lot of different experiences, both on the brand side as well as, now on the association side. What have you kind of, what is the biggest challenge from a marketer's perspective that you've faced, throughout your time, whether it's all the way back to selling candy to, something more recently?
So marketing is hard, right? Marketing is hard. It's a challenge. It doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. It doesn't mean it's impossible. But ultimately, marketing becomes really hard when we do stuff. Everybody in the world thinks they can do what you guys do in the classroom. That's a hard space to be in when everybody thinks they can market. And just because they think they should doesn't mean they should, doesn't mean they know how, right? So the challenge is always, how do you prove marketing's value to the business? How do you maintain marketing space when you have other parts of the company who may have a more storied career? People are excited about finance speaking. People are excited about the other division speaking. But marketing really has to have a seat at the table and a leadership space, and that's hard. And so whether it's launching new products, extending the products you have now, creating new space, incorporating new technology, those are the challenges to make sure that you keep on top of what's happening in marketing, you protect and hone the craft of marketing, and you put your all in it. I think that for me, that's the part that's always challenging. Like I said, you come in, nobody comes into a company and says, I can do what finance does, right? They never do, right? No one comes in and says, I can do what IT does. But you'll get a lot of people saying they can do what marketing can do. And so being able to protect and defend and to deliver on the promise of marketing is really important.
Yeah, it's really critical as a marketer to be able to express your value and why you need to have a seat at the table, especially in that executive boardroom. So, uh, AMA obviously as an organization has been around for a very long time. I think it's like over 100 years.
Yeah.
And, currently has nearly 29,000 members across the academic, the collegiate communities. And for those of you about to graduate, there's also the professional AMA community, and that's really one of the larger spaces. When we were at the International Collegiate Conference, you were doing one of these fireside chats. You kind of talked about the state of AMA and how your vision over the last 3 years has been about making it the essential space for marketers. So, from a student perspective about to graduate, what might that mean for them in terms of this essential space for marketers, and I would argue really business professionals, whether you're a marketer or some other leader?
We want you to know that this is your professional community. This is a space that you're in. If you're going to have dynamic change in career, you do that being connected to people who've come before you, being connected to peers who are in the left and right, and being there to help those who are coming behind you. So having a community that you can be a part, that becomes a part of Essential. From there, we kind of build into, is it going to be a space where you're going to be challenged, where you're going to be supportive, where you're going to have the resources that you need? It's not just getting that first job, but it's how does it help you succeed in that for the next job and the job after that. 10 years from now, you may come and say, Benny, I want to start my own agency, or I want to teach. Do we have the resources to be able to provide that for you? What's incredible about AMA as an organization is we have members, resources, and tools, and really a network that's across all the different parts of marketing, whether you're doing technology-driven marketing, marketing in analytics, brand, creative. We have members and resources that are there. Whether you're at the beginning of your career, the middle, and executive set, we have ways for you to connect. And whether you bounce between academic and professional, I can't tell you how many of our members are professors like you have here and are running, enterprises other places. We just recently were talking about the CMO of Major League Soccer, who's the CMO of Major League Soccer, but also a professor at Stern Business School, that are part of space in there. And Major League Soccer supported our social impact, a video competition that we did. All these ways that marketing comes together and your work can be dynamic. That's what we're trying to build for the AMA. And it's contemporary, it's urgent, it's now, it's the things you need to succeed in your career, it's the connections across those spaces. And, our goal is to break down as many barriers to marketing because our careers are going to be dynamic, right? What you think you're going to do tomorrow, I bet you it'll change in 5 years. I bet you it'll change in 10 years. Not in a negative way, but because our world is dynamic and changing. You're going to grow. There's going to be more resource and more opportunity. And that's exciting. And so AMA is kind of your partner to ride with you on all those things.
Brought up the fact that marketing is really always changing, right? And not just marketing, business in general.
Yes.
And so, from your vantage point, what do you think about the future of marketing? And, what do you see coming? Maybe what would you like to see included in the profession's future?
Right. I think there's not a denying it's kind of obvious in the space, but I'll say it out loud because sometimes you need to say it out loud. The world is dynamic, marketing is dynamic, all of it is changing, right? You have to say that because sometimes we forget that and we expect that it's going to be what I studied last week is going to always hold true. What holds true is your ability to be curious, your ability to problem solve, your ability to seek solutions and innovate. That never goes out of style. That's the training that you get in marketing to do. Now, the tool and platform may change, and I can date us all and throw out all types of technologies and spaces and have us wince and cringe and space in there. But the technology you love today will be the joke of tomorrow, right? It's kind of that space in there. We joke about the fact that for those who are old enough to remember, and I've seen some art exhibitions that relish in that, there's a point in time that AOL thought it was good to just send a whole bunch of CDs to people all the time, every day, everywhere you lived. I'm not disparaging them. That actually worked for their business in that time 30 years ago. But you see how I say that, and either we don't remember or people are like, that sounds horrible, right? There's a point in time we're going to look back and go, we all did TikTok videos. What were we thinking? Right? That's just the nature of the beast. But marketing needs to be, and you as marketers need to be open to that flexibility. What can I try? What can I dynamically use? Because it's not just the business changes, we as customers change. And I lump us in there because you're going to be a marketing strategist, but you're also going to be a customer as well, right? You think about it, we all have multiple identities at one time. Tim Cook is going to be CEO of Apple, and he's going to be a son, a partner, a parent, a best friend, and a consumer of Levi jeans all at the same time. So the things that you're going to need are going to change and evolve. And I think the best thing you can do is equip yourself to be ready to change and evolve. Your brand mission may change, your company you work for may change, but these core skills are going to be needed.
I mean, part of what you just said may lead into my next question here in terms of what do you think the biggest hurdle or blind spot might be for, I'm going to say a young marketer, but I know we also have individuals that aren't marketing majors in this room right now. And so just as a young business professional, what should they be, thinking about that maybe they're not thinking about yet?
Don't get caught up in definitions of space that you got, right? That's one of the things where we can self-limit ourselves. If you come in and say, I'm only a brand marketer, therefore I don't think about X, Y, and Z, then you set yourself up to not be able to advance. If you're a marketer, saying I'm not good at finance, so I won't think about finance, sets many a brilliant marketer behind because then you don't have the language to work through the skill set in there. I think the best thing we can do as marketers is be open to all those things around it. How do I take and learn something from every part of the business to help me get to that goal? What gives you credibility as marketers in the space isn't that we speak marketing. It's your ability to understand and speak the other languages around the table. I know that everybody in this room has hardcore training in marketing. That's without a doubt. But your success is going to become how do you translate that and carry influence with all the other business leaders you're working with? And that's something you're always going to be working for. It's always going to be the space in there.
Again, for those of you that are not marketing students, right, you're still getting principles of marketing and that here on campus. And so it's the opposite is just as true.
Yeah.
If you're IT, being able to speak marketing language, if you're in finance, being able to speak the marketing language too.
You're going to benefit by being able to drive the business for the things that matter to the business. Now that is a for-profit answer. You can substitute business for, an NGO concern. You can substitute it for a B Corp space. You can substitute it for a charitable mission, right? You can take those things out. Either way, you become a stronger, more dynamic marketer if you're thinking about that space. With my team, I spend a lot of time reinforcing this notion of a triple kind of bottom line for us, that the work we do needs to focus on mission and meaning. It also needs to have a focus on growth and revenue, and then a focus on relevance and impact. And the sweet spot for us is kind of being marketing led is if we're doing stuff that covers all three of those. It makes sense for us, it makes sense for the businesses, it makes sense for our stakeholders. Now, not every role you're going to be in is going to give you that space in there, but if you have some type of guide pointed in there, it's going to help drive you and your marketing. It's going to bring all the stuff you're learning in class and make it, front and center for you.
Kind of building off of what we've been talking about, what are some other skills that are critical for, again, whether it's marketers or other young business professionals to be thinking about as they're about to embark on their early career?
Right.
And how does that translate a couple years down the road? You talked about the AMA being a
Right.
resource for professionals throughout their career transition. So can you speak to some of those skills that are going to be longstanding, I guess, as well as others?
I'll give you some of the fun ones that can be on the front of the t-shirt. Don't be afraid of numbers. Just like I've had marketers that I've worked with and they're like, I don't do numbers. Like, don't be afraid of marketers. I know numbers. I know that's not anybody in this room, but I think that that's a space in there because having that adroit ability to do analysis and understand the finance, the numbers and meaning in that, it's going to be important. It's going to serve you well. Don't underestimate the value of marketing. So when you're in a part of an organization, we can kind of silo and just talk to other marketing folks. And then we miss the opportunity to build coalition with the finance team, the legal team, the other people who are involved in the business. So having the people soft skill to be able to read the room, if you will, engage with other people in there, I think is important. Not losing the ability to experiment. All the new technology that comes in, we just did a bit of research on AI, and we saw that in our research, 82% of marketers are the first movers to experiment with AI in their organizations. That's powerful because that number isn't as high with other parts of the org. So you don't expect the finance team to be experimenting with generative AI and putting the company's finance numbers out in the open web. You don't expect that. But the marketing team is going, how does this work? How can I go in? And you're getting pressure from the leadership in organizations to be the ones to try and experiment. So don't be afraid of the numbers. Don't be afraid of the math, right? Understand your power to persuade and engage people. Be willing to translate in that space in there. Don't be afraid of experimenting with new technologies, new approaches. And then I would say the last one is understanding that all of our actions are global in significance. I've had marketers who are like, my business isn't global, and then they don't look at the fact that 30% of their web traffic is outside the US or their fastest growing customer base is in there. We're at a space where that's not a question of whether your business is global. It's a question of whether you're going to understand, internalize, and build that for success.
Part of what you've talked about, even in that last answer and earlier, is really the importance of being open to change.
Right.
And obviously in your previous roles from a graphic design perspective, but can you talk a little bit about the value of creativity and being open to innovation? And I would certainly call you a disruptor in terms of how you've already transformed AMA over the last 3 years. How can we nurture that within ourselves, and how can students build on their creativity and innovation?
So I will tell you this, when I was sitting in the same seats that you are, the seats weren't as nice and it wasn't as stylish in there. I accepted the fact that I break things. Now my team would be mad at me because I would probably say different language instead of things, but I break stuff. And I embrace the fact that when you're creating things that are new and challenging, you have to embrace that disruption. And when you look at companies that are going to be hiring you, or whether you're starting your own business, they're not hiring you to just do the same thing they did 20 years ago. They're hiring you to help you transition to lead forward. Now, they may not say it in that way in there, but when you're going to the interviews and they're asking you to be involved in social, they're asking you to be involved in digital, they ask you to help make sense of privacy or new markets. That's all the areas that they're looking for you to help be a part of change. And so like understanding early on that breaking things, changing things, thinking about them more dynamically is a superpower that is fit for marketing. all the things we talk about with a brand expression or finding new audiences, these are all change moments for a company. No one's studying here to go, let me replicate the P&G ad campaign from 1965. So raise your hand if you're trying to do that. Like, nobody wants to do that, right? What do you want to do? You want to do the ad that's the most talked about in the Super Bowl. You want to launch the new business that didn't exist 5 years ago and now is credible. You want to drive social impact around the topic that you've been tasked to put on. These are all disruptive change spaces. You want to use new technologies and platforms to do things, right? That's where marketing comes in. That's where understanding, embrace the fact that as a marketer, you're going to be a change agent. Whether people see it or not, the work you do is going to help change.
Along those lines, at lunch, you were sharing the story about an acquaintance in terms of they started Twitch.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great example of, sometimes you don't know what that next innovation or disruptive, whether it's technology
Right.
or new product space, what have you seen in terms of interacting with, again, a variety of brands? I mean, Benny has talked to the CMO of McDonald's, all kinds of different brands. He's talking to the CMO of the Chicago Cubs soon. So what have you, gleaned from those conversations or lessons that you see out there among these different disruptive marketers?
They're scared, but they're not afraid. So let that sink in. That's a little different, right? They're scared, that keeps them constantly on their edges, that they need to be better, faster, more dynamic, think, support their teams, build, create the opportunities. But they're not afraid of doing things that break the norms, that are bold and push the business forward. And no matter what brand or space, B2C, B2B, whether it's global or local, you find that kind of throughput. They find their own moments in there where they're like, hey, this is a chance that I have to push this forward. This is a chance that I have to lead with my team. What I also love I get a chance to talk to some of the older CMOs, the really successful ones are leaning on their team members who are you guys. They're not coming in and saying, I have all the answers. I tell my team all the time, I don't expect us to have all the answers. I do expect us to have all the questions. And it's a different way of thinking about the world around you to be like, okay, because that's where the innovation comes in. What if, why if, how? Questioning, is this the way we have to do it? I know we've always done it this way, but is this the way we have to do it? Sometimes the answer is, yeah, it makes sense. That's what you do. A lot of times it's not. We have other devices. Our consumers have changed. Our offering has changed. The marketplace expects something different. And having that fresh set within your team allows you to move forward. Is that scary? Yes. Is it bold and necessary? It definitely is. You think about some of the brands who've made kind of epic leaps because of things that they find to be true to who they are. And please forgive me, professors in the room, if I butcher the case, but I'm thinking back to a few years ago of CVS, the drugstore case in there, coming in and saying, we're going to give up selling tobacco products. Solid part of their business. You got to be crazy to come in the boardroom and say, I'm going to give up this solid part of my business. But they knew their brand was going to be about being a wellness company. And those two things were incongruent. You couldn't be a wellness company and be selling a bunch of tobacco. And so they had to make this break, which meant they thought on the dashboard they were going to lose money because you're breaking away from this business. The exact opposite happens in that they double down in the space and people appreciate that spot and it changes the business in that moment. That's a being scared, but being bold kind of movement in there. Lots of brands, lots of businesses have those kind of moments. That's a writ large one. Sometimes it's small and private. Sometimes it may be, we're working here. We talked about everybody getting jobs locally sometimes. Sometimes it's the local mom and pop business that you get a job to be their first marketing person. And you're like, I know you've been doing this for 20 years, but this would work differently. Yes, you're seeing other pressures in the marketplace. That's being scared. But we're going to do this different. That's being, not being afraid.
Mentioned bold, and the students and faculty here know that the chancellor's message is always whitewater bold.
Oh, I didn't even know
that's
that.
the mantra here in terms of campus. And from a marketing perspective, one of the things that we've done here is really dove headfirst into AI.
Yep.
Right. And so you talked about in the marketing space, the research that AMA has done shows that marketing as a business function is
Right.
maybe leading the pack in terms of AI usage. Can you talk a little bit about how AI is changing the marketing space and what that might
It,
mean for students?
it is changing. It means that it will be a part of your toolkit from here on out. It will be a part of your, but what we know is marketing is in its, I mean, AI is in its nascent state, and marketing with AI is only going to get better. I saw a presentation of an AI toolkit that allowed small and medium businesses. So just as a case, small and medium businesses typically struggle doing media, right? It's not that they can't afford an ad on local TV or stream or online. It's often they can afford the placement, they can't afford the production. They can't make an ad to actually use. And so that's always been a challenge. I got a chance to get a demo from an AI platform that actually would take your prompt, you put in the information, it would scour the web and pull images in there and create your own video that you could use, 30, 60, 15-second slot. I was on this phone for this demo, they put in the prep. Within 15 minutes, we had a first pass of video. It wasn't perfect. It was kind of rough on the edges. They picked the wrong logo from before in there, but the prompt let us pull up the spreadsheet and you could go in and go, wrong logo, use this one, edit this and use that. Within 25 minutes of like a remedial demo that I was getting in there, we had a serviceable ad for this local coffee shop. That would have been an agency of 10 of you in the room, right? To do that would have been, you know, tens of thousands of dollars, would have been one option and done. Before we finished the call, we changed the other prompts. We had two, you know, and that was us slow pacing it. I think that that's going to change the world. Is Coca-Cola going to do their video like that? No, right? Is Pepsi going to do theirs like that? No. Are the big brands going to do? No, they're going to have creative teams. They're going to work a little differently. But a chunk of marketing is going to be the mom and pop ice cream shop that's down the street here, right? That this will help move that and you'll be the one that's driving it. We've often said in jest that you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to a person that knows how to use AI. And so AI at this moment works really good for the rote things, for the like checkbox stuff or the spaces. Where you distinguish yourself is AI can't do the super critical insight work that you can do. It can't do that higher level thinking that humans do, right? And so that's the space to go in. Will it get better along the way? Yes. I can tell you that demo that I saw was 6 months ago. I bet you it's better today. That's the nature of this kind of constant improvement. The machines are going to constantly improve, so why shouldn't you? Right? That's kind of always my message of us getting tighter with that. But I think this is going to be another tool set. You know, I was talking to a brand leader, CEO of a global design company, and he talked about this moment when, you know, when he was studying design, you got into design for brands because you could draw really well with a pencil. And how all of a sudden, all of the tool sets, whether Adobe a generation earlier or Canva now came in, it's like, oh, it's going to take away that. Well, no, at the end of the day, you still needed to be a really good designer to conceptually do stuff. You just had another tool to use, you know, that you could still create really bad stuff with the tool. And so you have that moment where, are you going to create stuff that works for you in AI? Because it's not just magically doing the trick of, I got ChatGPT to write ad copy. You know, if everybody has ChatGPT to write ad copy, how do you distinguish yourself? It's all the people in this room that I said that are coming in and saying, this is a better way. I can push my brand in a different way. You know, are you gonna, as I said at the beginning, is it gonna be challenging and hard? Yes. It's gonna be dynamic, but that's what we all thrive on in being in marketing, having the challenge.
You know, based off of that, obviously the key thing is as the human in the loop,
Yep.
how do we ensure that we're adding value? And so again, for the students, as
Yep.
they're thinking about 5 years from now, what am I doing to ensure that, yeah, I'm not replaceable by AI because I'm adding the human element?
I always make sure we highlight the things that you're bringing to the table and making sure the work that you're doing is tying to the business. Like there are lots of times that I've counseled professionals who like have a project they love doing, but it has nothing to do with what the core business is. It's always kind of hard to maintain that if times get tighter and there has to be cuts or there are investments, if the work you're doing is not related to the core business. So as marketers, we want to be thinking about, I did X and this is how it relates to the business. Even if your boss isn't thinking about it, even if your peers aren't thinking about it, I think it serves you well as a marketer to be like, I did this event and this is how we sold more of this. Or I did this event, this is how it engaged more, potential customers. This is how it moved our brand forward in there. I did something that added to that. This is how I'm wielding this tool or technique. Those are going to be things you're going to serve well to be able to tell that narrative and story. It goes back to my marketing. It's marketing the work that you're doing in marketing.
Yeah, no matter what, you're always selling
You-
or marketing what you're doing, what your idea is, marketing yourself.
Yeah,
Marketing is everywhere.
you have to in a space in there. If not, then you have no grounds to grow in a space in there. Like that allows you to fight for the promotion, the position, the opportunity before you even get in the room. That they say it also serves you well if you start your own enterprise. We also know from the bit of research that we've done, about 80% of marketers will eventually run their own business, whether it's in between a job, whether it's as you spent time teaching, you want to do your own thing on the side, whether it's you've been the CMO of a company and you've got all these contacts and you start your own, you're going to end up in that space. And so these tools and thinking and resources, the mindsets are going to serve you well.
You've had your podcast, I think, for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, a minute now.
And I would highly encourage you to check it out. And by the way, Benny did not tell us to put this QR code up there. We put that up there for him because I would
That's
highly
embarrassing.
encourage you to check it out. You always have to be marketing. So,
Yeah.
it's called marketing and part of the premise is that marketing is at the intersection of everything.
Everything.
And so can you kind of talk about, your thought process and how you've approached, some of the students are doing their own content creation,
Right.
they're always interested in how do I become a thought leader? And so can you talk about your experience as a podcast?
So going back to the t-shirt for the podcast is don't be boring. That's the t-shirt, right? Don't be boring. How do we find spaces? We knew that there were people who were doing marketing who had done other things. We knew there are people who may have marketing in their title or not, but their stories were influenced by marketing. So how could we sit down and have a conversation for about 40 minutes about this moment, their career or spaces in there? So we've talked to CEOs and CMOs. We've talked to students and leaders. I've talked to everyone from one that still blows my mind is I got a chance to interview 94-year-old Phil Kotler. Yes, Phil Kotler from the books that you guys read that we have in there. 4Ps, Phil Kotler, 94 years old. You know what we didn't talk about? All the stuff he wrote in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. 94-year-old talked about what's next for marketing. It was the most humbling and crazy conversation ever. And at the end of it, when we stopped recording, he started crying. And I was like, oh, what's going on? Why did I make the 94-year-old cry? He was thankful to me that we talked about the future because he had thoughts about all the things he had seen about what's next. He knows he's not going to be there celebrating with you 30 years from now, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want the ideas and the conversations out there. So that's like a pure marketing space in there. But then I'll talk to someone who is running a museum or who's built an agency that grew up in some space that's adjacent marketing. We try to find interesting stories of all different backgrounds, of all different spaces. We have a lot of global guests. We have a lot of startups. And then we have a lot of classic like CMOs. One the conversations I love the most was with a dear friend of mine who is the chief brand officer of 3M. 3M is the most innovative company in the world, period. Hard stop. Every measure you want to look at. They create more stuff that they don't use than most companies come up with. And that 3M creates stuff that they create for one purpose. It's not that great, and then it becomes brilliant for something else. It's very much a part of it. So having that conversation, and his portfolio is corporate marketing, brand, and design. It's a very different kind of mashup in the space. We've talked to researchers who are doing marketing work with rare diseases. And they talked about the break in the marketplace where there's all the funding and resources for the main diseases, but these really rare diseases don't get the attention, and how he's built marketing and doing market research focus groups to help drive awareness, support, and everything. These are all kind of conversations that I get to have back to back that you would never think you'd go from sports marketing conversation to rare diseases to, talking about TGI Fridays frozen food in the frozen aisle and how they innovated and took over the whole case. Had a real conversation about that, right? So that's what we get to do. I encourage you guys to check it out. We release in batches of seasons every few months, but you can go online now, and we've got about 50 episodes there, and it's just a fun listen, I think. And it's one of the things that I love most about what we do.
You know, and again, I would highly, highly encourage you to check it out. If you scan that QR code, it goes to the AMA webpage that has all of the episodes on it. So check that out for sure. So, I want to leave time here in a couple of minutes for students to ask questions. So, think about what questions you might want to ask Benny. And I think Alana and Rafa are going to be going around with microphones. So, get those questions ready. But Benny, I want to give you, one last question from me for at least for now. What advice do you, can you kind of sum up what advice do you have for students as they're about to enter, the workforce, or even for those students that maybe have a couple years left?
Right.
What's kind of your big picture advice that you would give them?
I would tell you guys that this experience matters. Don't take it light that you're in a room with a few hundred marketing students. This is going to be your network, your career, your support system, your business opportunity partners. Don't take that for granted. This is an opportunity. You're going to have tests, you're going to have assignments. I'm sorry, I'm not telling them not to do that. But know that you might be sitting there after an assignment and the next idea comes up because you all are talking, because the lecture has sparked an idea to come in. We talked about the power of this space, whether you come back for grad school or you do other work in there. This is going to be where you kind of launch your career. The AMA is a part of that story. Your relationships with each other are part of that story. The work you have in there. Sometimes our parents think that going to college is just what you do in the classroom on the grades on the tests. I will tell you that that's like the tip of the iceberg. It's all this other stuff that's underneath that really positions you. I can tell you that professionally, some of my closest friends, but also professional go-to folks, are the people who were in grad school with me, right? It was a group of 26 of us. We were a cohort. I think I talked to half of them at least once every other week or month. And they're all doing dynamic things, and it's great because we get to grow and continue that. And that's been years, and that's still a value. So I would encourage you to think about that these relationships matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to open it up. I see Alana has a question over there.
Say your name, your major, and what grade you're in.
Uh-oh.
And then your question.
I'm Ava. I am a freshman and I'm majoring in marketing. And my question is,
Ava, yeah.
what did you major in college?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're not gonna believe this. So I went to Yale, and Yale did not have a marketing major for undergrad. I actually majored in architecture and history of art and culture. That is what I majored in while running marketing businesses in between class.
Benny was talking about anybody thinks they can do marketing, even architecture students.
Hey, I knew I was a marketing student at heart. We just didn't have that major. But I will tell you this, all the things I learned in architecture, I apply as a marketing leader today. I learned about taking a big vision, architects have to do that, and building out a plan that allows you to pragmatically deliver it. So you could build a beautiful vision, but you still got to talk to the plumber or carpenter or electriker to make it happen. I learned from my professors in there that you're going to come out and the world won't have changed in your architecture classes, but you're going to see the world differently. Very much about marketing space in there. And I also learned that no matter what, you are not the focus audience. Even if the audience are people named Benny that live in my house, you are not and that gives you that freedom to actually develop marketing that matters.
All right, our next one's going to come from over here.
I'm Anj. I'm a marketing major and a junior.
Yes.
I was wondering, what is the best professional advice you have ever got?
Oh my goodness. So I will give you some professional advice from a dear mentor. There's three things, but one from a dear mentor who passed away a few years ago. He basically told me, he was managing partner of PwC at one point in time. He told me, always spend 5 minutes prepping before any meeting because it'll be 10 minutes more than everybody else. And he said that in that way, and it's always served me well to be like, even if I'm like, okay, what are we doing here? Okay, you'll be surprised at how few times, especially early in your career, because you're going to end up with greater command over the information. I will tell you something I grew up with my mom saying all the time. She didn't create it, but she instilled this in us all the time. She would always tell us to never take no from somebody who doesn't have a power to give you a yes. And my mom just would live that, and she would, navigate things in there, be like, okay, she'd understand situations like, okay, there's probably somebody else who's in charge of it. You think about that as an entrepreneur and as a marketer, that all the people who tell you no. That story I talked about, the business plan, there was a whole bunch of no, no, no. It's getting to the yes that's important. And then the last bit of advice was a professor who I took a class at Yale called design, and it was design thinking before Stanford made design thinking a thing. It was IDEO before that was a thing, and it was about this nexus of creative problem solving. And he told me one day walking at school, always collect art. And it blew my mind because I was like, dude, I can't afford to stay here at Yale. What are you talking about? But the notion of being involved with people who are problem solving, taking creative ideas, being open to look and see new things in there, that's something that served me well. So the prep, the being resilient, not taking no, and seeking out other creators. That work for that's I know you only one, but those three kind of work together for me.
Thank you. I have the next question over here.
What you got?
Hi, my name is Carter. I'm a sophomore and a marketing major.
Yes.
What's your biggest weakness and how do you overcome it in like a business sense?
Oh my goodness. How do you overcome it? So I am always in the space that the strength and weakness tie together in that paradox. So one of the things is I can always see stuff that's not happening. I can always see around corners on top of corners on top of corners, which means that sometimes your teams are not there with you yet. Your businesses are not there with you yet. You're brought in to have a vision in there. And I've learned that I don't beat myself up for seeing stuff that others can't. I just know I need to work harder to ladder people into that. Over time, people have more confidence in. I may not see it, Benny sees it, but I trust that that's where we're going. And that's like the biggest, value. Like, oh my goodness, people say it. A lot of times I would come up with stuff and it's like, I think he's a little crazy. Technical term, just saying. But it is the crazy and dynamic stuff that wins when we think about marketing and space and opportunity. It's the things that we wouldn't think of. When did you think that you'd pay more for a gallon or water than you do gas? But you do. And my favorite example of this, when did we all think we needed whole body deodorant? Like, that's the interesting thing. We've always had whole bodies, we've always had deodorant. The last year, that category was the top fastest growing sales for P&G and everything else. It's all marketing. It's completely all marketing in the space. Once again, always had whole bodies, always had deodorant. Someone had to kind of plan that out and go, this could be something. And now you're looking and seeing the results that they've made a category out of leftover category.
All right, I got our next question to ask over here.
Hi, my name is Selena. I'm a junior. My major is marketing, and my
Yes.
question to you is: we always talk about how AMA is meant for everybody, but why would you encourage a non-marketing major or non-business major to join AMA?
Oh my goodness, because marketing makes you better. That's just it. I'm biased. I'm gonna tell you that. I'm 100% biased. Marketing makes you better. I want to live in a world in which my potential accounting and CFO understands the core principles of marketing and what people are doing. I want to be in a world in which my ops person understands what marketing does, right? Because that's going to make a better request when you're down the line where the supply chain understands what marketing does and doesn't. I'm doing an ad if I'm driving space. That means supply chain, you need to order the product because we're going to drive demand for it versus I'm not going to do anything just because you did an ad on the Super Bowl. I'm not going to have any product in place. Like those are nightmares that companies exist all the time. I also think that every part of business is marketing. Once again, I am biased. So if you're a non-marketing major, what better way to have a chance to get a shorthand of connecting with other peers? Because guess what? That conversation down the line, you're the finance person, you have a marketing challenge. I want them calling each of you in this room. I don't want the finance person figuring it out by themselves. Like I said, I'm biased. I'm a marketer. Yeah, I think there's a question all the way in the back. I don't want you to think I didn't see you raise your hand. No, you had your hand waving. You can't get away from it now.
Okay, it's like a super generic question. But
Okay.
I'm Ashley. I'm a marketing major and I'm a senior graduate
Yes.
Bay. So
Congrats.
thank you. I guess how do you separate good marketers from great marketers?
Ooh,
Like what makes one stand out more than the other?
commitment, practice, grit, and innovation. Those are the things that celebrate that. And it's kind of getting there. And there's a bit of luck, but it's kind of that notion that success happens when luck meets preparation, right? So it's a bit of that. So the great marketers will tell you they didn't just magically become great, but in reality, you watch their work ethic. You watch the way in which they learn and they lead. They're doing all the right things that put them in the position to have a moment that separates them as great, whether you define it on company success, on leadership success, on campaign. There are lots of ways to slice it. But I think that that core fundamental, I'm building teams, I'm leading, I'm making a mark on the business that I have, I'm creative, I'm innovative. Those are all the things that if we would decide what's a great marketer, they do that. And that doesn't mean you're working at Nike or Coca-Cola. You could be working at the startup brand that comes in. The marketing team was great at Warby Parker when nobody knew what Warby Parker glasses were. They still were doing great stuff.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hi. I'm Luke. I'm a senior marketing major here. I'm just wondering, what do you think that the biggest accomplishment you want to see AMA in the next decade or so accomplish?
Oh my goodness. I want it to not even be a guess or a question that AMA is the resource that you go to as a marketer. Whether you're beginning, middle, extended in your career, whether career changing, academic, entrepreneur space in there, that AMA is evolving to have the resources in the community that you need. So whether it's down the street in Whitewater or across the pond in the UK, I want AMA to be that space.
All right, cool. Our next is over here.
Hi, I'm Alexia. I'm a sophomore here and I'm a marketing major. And my question for you is,
Uh-oh.
what has been the biggest challenge for you overall in your career?
Oh my goodness. So I will say early on, it was finding a space and a place in marketing organization. So I was always doing entrepreneurial stuff where I knew I was marketing strategy and leadership. We were talking before, one of my first marketing jobs in the wild, I had to convince the CEO of the company that I could do marketing. He told me, you graduated from Yale, you should work on Wall Street. I had to beg him for a basic marketing job that I killed, but I had to. It was you don't look like marketing. You don't sound like what we've seen in marketing. Your background is so different from that space in there. And so early on, that was always a challenge, like finding spaces in there. I found opportunity in innovation and restarts. When people had really messed up, once again, I have good language today. When people had messed up in brands, I would get opportunities. So I developed this capability to be able to come in, see the problem, see the opportunity, turn it around, build it, make it better. So I ended up doing restarts. And then being able to see around the corners, like we mentioned, is really good when you're doing startups. So I worked for one of the first online education companies, and I started there leading marketing for them like 3 months before the iPad came out. So I was pitching parents on like educating their kids at home, and it wasn't all the stuff we had now, but that was all the work that I did with that company came to pass when the pandemic hit. All the things that we were like, we could do and everything else, the company like skyrocketed at that time. We had been building it for years. I had since left and everything else, but finding a space to go into it was always hard for me. And growing out of school, I didn't have this type of community to be a part of.
Hey, Benny.
Hey.
I just want to first say thank you for ICC. That was a great experience.
Oh my goodness.
Really,
Thank you guys for being there. You all made it. I was just there to cheer you on.
yeah, we learned a ton and we had a great time there. Now getting into my question. In high school, I read a book called Steal Like an Artist, and it's profound. And it just talked a lot about like originality being like inspiration based on other inspiration.
Right.
And so now with like generative AI and the way that we're going towards artistry nowadays, how would you recommend that we approach the future and navigate when things that we create and other things that are being created are just inspired by other things?
Right. I think none of the things we do are kind of standalone in space in there. That's always a myth and fallacy of creativity, that things just spring forth with nothing. There's always kind of some insight that goes. Sometimes it's self-evident, you see it in there. To that measure, I always tell my team if we have ideas, which goes along the line of that book and the theme that good artists copy and great artists steal. the kind of notion of seeing what the impact is, what the creative idea is. It's not a copy one-to-one, but understanding that. I think we're going to have some challenging times in setting, like, what are the ethical frameworks of defining what is creativity and craft at its own. The tension comes not on creativity, the tension comes on business and creativity, right? Because just creating something for the world that we iterate off of, that we deal in there, that part isn't complex, and it's generative and it's dynamic and it all ties in. Where it becomes a challenge is your creativity your commercial output? Is your creativity the intellectual property of your craft or your company or other space? Then we have to define where it begins, middle, and end. You know, think about music and the space in there. Think about the tension that hip hop had a few years ago. There's a cool documentary from a couple years that's called Copyright Cowboys, I think. And it talks about the fact that De La Soul's, like anybody who's a classic hip hop head will know the album. It has so many samples that it could never be released today. You could never sign off on all the legal documents in it. It's a music masterpiece. But when they did it, you know, it's kind of what you did. But today you couldn't because of the rules and structures in there. And they're designed to protect artists and craft and work. You know, brands are going to have some of those other spaces in there. What is a tribute? What is you know, a copying of other people's styles and space in there for a brand purpose? Those are going to be all the ethical things that I don't have the answers for, but you know, we as a group are going to have to figure out what the best space in there. I get a lot of inspiration from that around music and space because you have that, you know, that replication of creativity. We were talking before about a song that you fall in love with being re-recorded by 4 generations of artists and what they each bring to the table. But the core work at the beginning is the same song. We have mechanisms in place that the songwriter gets paid for that the artist gets paid for that. We're gonna have to figure that out for the other spaces.
All right, I think we have time for one more question, so I'm going to pass the mic to Taylor over here.
All right, bring us home, Taylor.
Hi, I'm Taylor, and I'm a sophomore, and I'm a marketing major as well. So, kind of looking at AMA as a whole, I know there's a ton of different chapters all around the world.
Yes.
So, speaking of chapters specifically, what really makes a certain chapter stand out from the others?
College or professionals in there?
I would say kind of the AMA chapter as a whole regarding or like regardless of attendance, like what can an AMA chapter do to really set themselves apart?
So one of
Collegiate chapter.
a collegiate chapter. So one of the things that's really important is having wonderful relationships with your professors and sponsors. That's the secret energy there. The next part is having wonderful relationships with the people to the left and right of you, that you're all studying marketing in your community going forward. And then the next part is thinking about this in a sustainable loop, your relationship with those who come before you and relationships that come behind you. We're all here because somebody cared, opened a door, shared, gave us access. It's our responsibility to do the same. Really dynamic chapters build off of that space, right? So you as a sophomore have lessons that are valuable to an incoming student, to a freshman. The seniors have lessons that are valuable to that. Learning from this environment you're in, like I said, this space is incredible what you have here at Whitewater. It's incredible. I wish I had like 1/10 of this as an undergrad. Anchoring into that spirit, I love the idea of the Whitewater Bold, making that part of the spirit that you have. So that's it.
Oh, again, I think Benny can stick around afterwards for a few other questions if anyone wants to come up. But you know, Benny, again, thank you so much for being here today. It was an absolute honor to have you here. Let's give Benny a round of applause.
Thank you, guys. Thank you all for taking the afternoon and hanging out with me.
Don't run off yet. We have just a couple of other announcements, and then don't forget to sign in at the end.
Okay.
All right, yeah. So you've probably heard me talk about this a billion times at this point, especially if you come to all of the AMA meetings. But it's Monday, June 9th. We're going to be doing our annual golf outing. We still are looking for a bunch of student volunteers to meet and greet and mingle with the golfers and try and get as many donations as possible. We also need volunteers to help us cold call companies to get prizes for our silent auction or our raffles. If you have any questions about that, please go talk to Taylor. She's the tall blonde woman that you see all over the place in AMA, so it's not that hard to find. But yeah, if you're interested, please scan the QR code. That stay after the meeting is outdated, so you don't have to do that. But if you are really dedicated to helping us make some calls, there's an opportunity for free golf potentially over at the outing itself. So if you're a golfer.
It's always a really fun time. There's our weekly schedule. If anyone needs it still, I'll leave it on for like 0.5 seconds. And then next week, Tuesday, we are doing a golf outing. It's one of our, or sorry, he was talking about golf. It's been a long week. We're doing a kickball and a cookout. It's one of our favorite recruitment activities. So I would highly encourage all of you going. We have a grill team that has had immaculate success this school year. So if you want to see what we can cook up, it's really yummy. And then I'm going to pass it over to Cam, who's going to share some stuff because he's the Whitewater ambassador for Red Bull.
Thank you. My name is Cam Kerber, and I am the student marketeer for Red Bull at the university. You may see me around campus handing out Red Bull, going to different events around the state. But today I'm here to talk to you about the Wings for Life World Run. All right, so the Wings for Life World Run was established in 2014. It's a true global running movement that takes place simultaneously all around the world on the first Sunday in May. So what's unique about this event is that 100% of all entry fees and donations go directly to the Wings for Life Foundation to support cutting edge research and projects. So the Wings for Life Foundation is a charity that what's it called? A charity that supports it's a charity that supports people that have spinal cord injuries. So all of the proceeds for this event go to the charity Wings for Life that supports that cause. The race format is very unique. Everyone starts at the exact same time all around the world. So for us, it starts at 6 a.m. at May 4th. And I know that's the day after Spring Splash and people are probably pretty tired and stuff. But I encourage you to wake up, get running early, get your wings, and come out and support a good cause. So this is going to be the QR code to sign up. And I encourage you to come after and talk to me if you're interested in it. But yeah, thank you so much.
If you do go on a run the morning after Spring Splash, it cancels out any bad decisions from the day before, so it'll clear your conscience. Here is the sign-in. And then thank you so much, everyone, again for coming. And then if we could just give Benny another round of applause. He flew out this morning to be here.
Yes, sir.
Yes, and then if there are any more questions that you guys want to ask Benny, he's going to hang out here for a little bit. Benny, completely unbiased. You told me that your son was touring colleges. Are you going to make him do AMA? Yeah.